How much do I charge for a photograph or a photo shoot? Hi, I'm Joel Grimes with another video blog, Behind the Lens. I get this question all the time. In fact, I had that question when I started out. What do I charge for my services? And so let's talk about that because I think it's important. Because I know, in fact, I even have a brother who's doing video now, and he calls me up and he says, hey, I'm at this job, what do I charge? I got two boys that are in photography now. One's doing video and one's doing stills. And they call me up and they say, hey, Dad, I got this job, what do I charge? All right. So it's an important question, and I've been doing this for 40 years. So I guess I have a little bit of history behind me on this. Number one thing I would say is this. Let's say you wait on tables and you make $100 a day waiting on tables. Maybe that's not that much, I don't know. But let's just say, I'm just throwing out a figure. If someone says to you, hey, I got this wedding, can you do my wedding? And you say, okay, I got to take off work to do your wedding. So now you're losing $100 to go photograph someone's wedding. Okay, so your opportunity cost is $100 for the day. So you say, I'll charge you $50. Well, then if you did that, you'd lose $50, right? So I always tell people, what do you make a day right now? You got to at least charge that. That's your opportunity, that you're going to lose that income if you have to give it up. That makes sense, all right? But let's say you have, $10,000 in camera equipment. You got a couple camera bodies, a couple lenses, a couple strobes, and so you have 10 grand in equipment. I don't know, 10 grand is not that much money. Equipment is so expensive, but let's just say you have 10 grand in equipment. And so someone wants you to do a wedding and you go, okay, yeah, I'll do it for $500. And you're thinking, oh, I can make $500. Well, you go out there and your camera falls over and smashes a lens. Who pays for that? Well, let's say you have insurance. Well, my deductible is $500. So let's say I smash a lens on a job and I have to pay my deductible, which is $500. How much money did I make on that photo shoot? Zero. So you have to think about all things. What does it cost you a month to survive? If you're starting out in photography and you say, I'm going to hang my shingle on the door, I'm a photographer now, and what does it cost you a month to stay in business? Well, I ask my kids this all the time. What does it cost you a month? Well, I'm living pretty cheap. Well, that's true. You are living pretty cheap, but you still got to pay something, right? You're paying for a phone. You got computers. You got all this stuff you're paying for. My kids have very expensive helicopters that they're running up in the air. And they could have $20,000, $30,000 in the helicopter. And they get a job for $5 grand to do a helicopter shoot. And that sounds like a lot of money, right? Not if you dump that helicopter. So these are all things you got to consider. You also have to look at what does the market value or marketplace pay for services. For example, let's take a wedding. This is kind of an interesting thought. There's always going to be someone that will pay $100 for a wedding, and there'll be someone who will pay $10,000 for a wedding. There'll be someone who will pay $100,000 to have a wedding done. There's always a slot to fill. So you can't say, well, the average is $5,000 a wedding. I'm going to start at $5,000 a wedding. Well, it'd be great if you could. But when you start out, you might have to start out at $500 a wedding. Now, if you start out at $500 a wedding and you have a very low expense, you might make a profit. Maybe not, but let's just say you could make a profit. Make more than you could wait on tables. The person that's charging $5,000 a wedding, they may have a couple assistants, they've got a studio that they're renting, they've got to pay monthly rent on. Their expenses may be to the point where they barely break even on a $5,000 wedding. So I always have a saying that if you want to stay competitive in the marketplace, you have to, number one, know what that service that you're offering, what's the value of that. And if you can stay and keep your overhead low, then you have a greater opportunity to make a profit than someone who's got a higher overhead. So that's one way to stay competitive. But you need to know where to make that, where's your profit line? Where at what point do you start to make a profit? And also you have to understand that there's all sorts of hidden things in a job, which is comes to the other question. When I do a job and I go to put a bid on a job, You have to ask all the right questions. So I do commercial advertising. So art director emails me or calls me up and says, I had a project, it's 3 days, we got blah, 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 blah. And usually they're pretty vague. They'll say, we need 10 to 20 shots. And I say, well, okay, is it 10 or is it 20? Well, we don't know. I say, okay, I'm going to give you a bid on 20. And they go, well, it may only be 10. Okay, well then here's what I'll do. I'll put in my line item a price for both, a 10 final images or 20 final images. I have to ask a lot of questions. Am I responsible for wardrobe, makeup, hair, all these other things? Do I need a helicopter? Do I need to rent a motorhome? I have to ask all the right questions. As a general rule, the person who's hiring you normally is very vague. They want to give you as little information as possible. They may not do that intentionally, but I think they do, some do. But it's just that they go, oh, someone says, we need a photo shoot, 2 days of shooting. And they just pass that information on to you. And again, you need to give a correct estimate or a bid, you need to ask all the right questions. So sometimes I ask so many questions, I start to get a little annoying. I know that sometimes starts to piss off some of the art directors or art buyers. They're like, oh, yeah, answer another question. Because they're so vague. And I usually respond by, look, I don't want to be a pain, but I need to know the answer to this question for me to give you an accurate bid. So don't be afraid to do that, because what's going to happen is, if you don't ask all the right questions, in the end, they're going to say, oh, hey, we needed, I said 20 images and you thought they said 10. And then you get stuck retouching 10 extra images for a client, and that takes you another extra day of work. So, and you're not getting paid for it. So you need to ask all the right questions to get an accurate bid. But I would leave you with this. There's a slot out there that needs to be filled. And you need to find out where that slot is and where you can position yourself in the marketplace to make a profit. And I always say that the end of everything, if you do a wedding and it's, a full day, you got editing to do, and you got to deliver the images, at the end of the job, if you have a smile on your face, then you did it right. If you had a smile on your face, you say, I made a good chunk of money on that wedding, it was worth it. But if you're grumbling and you're going, bah, 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 because you underbid, the expectations were higher than you thought, the client was a pain to work with, whatever, and at the end you're grumbling, then you didn't charge enough money. So that's what I always say. That's my little litmus test of saying I did it right, because in the end, yes, it was a lot of work. Yes, it was a pain. The client was, hard to work with, but I have a smile on my face because I made a profit. I can pay my bills. My kids now can eat, whatever it is. And so that's kind of how I work it. So there's a slot to fill. Make sure you know where it is that you can make a profit, and don't be afraid to charge what you're worth. And so that's another thing I get to. A lot of people go, I'm afraid to charge too much. Don't be afraid to charge too much. Someone will pay for what you do. And so you got to find that slot. So I hope that helps in terms of knowing what to charge. I can add to this. And I have a whole video on marketing. I talk about branding, all sorts of things. It's on my blog. My blog is, by the way, joelgrimesworkshops.com. I have all sorts of information on, I got a backlog of written blogs with images and stuff that I've had over the last 7 years. And you can check those out. I have free videos, behind the scenes stuff. I have some of my information on my workshops. All that good stuff is on there. My website is joelgrimes.com. And I try to keep that pretty current. And my Facebook is Joel Grimes Photography. And my Twitter is Joel Grimes Photo.